Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're taking a closer look at that terrible terror attack in Pahalgam, Kashmir.
Yeah, a truly brutal incident. Targeting innocent tourists, it really sends a shockwave.
Absolutely. And we saw those initial casualty reports. The search for the attackers is still ongoing, right?
That's right, still developing in some ways.
And the immediate response, well, the prime minister cut short his trip to Saudi Arabia, came right back. And the home minister was actually in Pahalgam just last night visiting the site.
Showing the gravity of the situation clearly.
Exactly. So our mission, in this deep dive is to go beyond just the headlines. We want to try and unpack the different layers here.
Understand the motives, the responses.
Yeah, and the broader picture, the geopolitical context this whole thing kind of stirs up.
It's definitely got a lot of interconnected threads, not just security, but politics, economics, even ideology. It all comes together here.
Okay, so let's start with the message. The intent behind this horrific act, it feels like a very direct, almost brutal message to Kashmiris themselves.
Saying that piece, any sense of things getting back to normal is just not okay. Punishing those who embrace that normalcy.
And there's even this, disturbing idea floating around that down the line, Pakistani leadership might actually try to claim this, maybe subtly, to undermine India, undermine Modi. Why would they do that?
Well, historically, claiming or, associating with these kinds of acts, even if indirectly, it's been a tactic. It can project strength, sow discord.
Right.
It can fuel anti-India feeling, boost their own story about Kashmir, both at home and maybe internationally.
So domestically, it rallies people. Internationally, it highlights instability.
Potentially, yes. Questioning India's governance, that sort of thing.
It's a chillingly calculated move if that's the case. And targeting tourists, that feels really significant, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Especially with Kashmir's tourism showing some, positive signs, particularly after the Article 370 changes. This feels like a direct hit on that progress.
It does. It's designed to inject fear, stop visitors coming. It hits local businesses, art hotels, transport, artisans.
The everyday people relying on that income.
Exactly. And beyond that, the longer-term damage, it could be to investor confidence in the whole region. If Kashmir feels unsafe, attracting investment becomes much, much harder.
It just stifles everything. A direct hit on the region's economic future.
Pretty much.
And sadly, this whole thing feels grimly familiar, doesn't it? People are mentioning Uri, Pulwama. It's like deja vu.
It really is.
One source even described it as Nazi style, which is a very strong comparison. Targeting civilians based on identity. We heard those awful reports, attackers asking about religion before killing, but sparing women and children.
Yeah, that's selective targeting. Asking about religion, apparently mentioning Modi to survivors. It's a tactic straight out of the playbook for inflaming religious tensions, not just in Kashmir, but trying to create divisions across India.
Making it about religion, trying to split communities apart, and directly undermine the government's authority.
Precisely. It's designed to create those deep societal cracks, so fear and distrust that lasts.
Okay, let's shift to the operational side. There are strong signs these attackers weren't locals outsiders, as some are saying.
Right. The evidence seems to point that way.
But the way it was planned, executed. That screams local intelligence, local help, doesn't it? What specifically suggests that?
Several things, really. They seem to know the resort layout, including apparently a less obvious way out.
Okay.
They probably had information on security response times. Some analyses suggest they expected maybe 20, 30 minutes.
Wow.
Knowledge of the terrain for escaping, maybe even knowing who was staying there. There was talk of a possible naval officer or other personnel. It all points to inside knowledge.
So these local informants, the Mukbiras, it highlights this really deep-rooted problem, right? One expert said these radical mindsets, they've been around for decades. You can't just wish them away.
No, you can't. It's incredibly difficult to root out quickly.
And it's this mix, isn't it? Money from, drugs, the conflict economy, plus this radical ideology. It creates fertile ground for finding help. Why is it so hard to dismantle these networks?
Well, it's complex. The money is a big factor in an area with few opportunities. The ideology, it's been pushed for years through propaganda.
Right.
And these networks, they often work in secret, using family ties, creating a climate of fear where ordinary people are scared to help the authorities. It's a whole ecosystem.
It's more than just security action, then. Socioeconomic work, countering the ideology itself.
Absolutely. A multi-pronged, long-term effort.
Let's look at the response, immediate and potential. Reports said drones were up in about 15 minutes. Troops arrived maybe 40 minutes later.
Roughly, yeah. Those are the initial figures we're hearing, and 2 of the 4 attackers were neutralized quite quickly.
So tactically, that initial part seems, well, effective to some degree.
Taking down 2 attackers swiftly, yes, that shows responsiveness. And arresting another, identifying the 4th, who apparently went back to Pakistan before, that shows they're pursuing leads, trying to map out the network.
But beyond that immediate stuff, you can feel the anger, can't you? There's this demand for something more. That image of the young woman with her loved one, just heartbreaking.
It's incredibly powerful. It brings home the human cost.
And it fuels calls for a really visible response, not just catching the guys left, but maybe, action across the line of control. What kind of options are being floated?
Well, the talk covers a wide range. Things like formally ending the ceasefire along the Law Sea,
Okay.
maybe targeted artillery or missile strikes on known terrorist camps or infrastructure in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir,
Hitting their bases.
or even hitting Pakistani army posts believed to be helping these groups. And then there's the more ambitious idea of a broader strategy towards eventually reclaiming Pak.
That's a huge range of possibilities. But there seems to be agreement on needing a sort of graduated response, ramping up the pressure.
That seems to be the thinking in many quarters, yes.
Yeah.
A step-by-step increase in pressure.
But that immediately makes you think, retaliation. How would Pakistan react? Airstrikes are concerns.
Right. Very much so. Any major Indian action, especially crossing the Lahr Sea, would almost certainly trigger a Pakistani response. We saw that after Balakot in 2019, their air incursions.
Right.
So India has to factor that in very carefully. Assess Pakistan's potential military moves, diplomatic moves, make sure its own defenses are ready, and try to keep any escalation, manageable.
Okay, let's flip to Pakistan's view, or at least their public stance. Predictably, an immediate denial, calling it a false flag by India.
Textbook denial. It's their standard operating procedure, really.
And reports that Pakistani officials are calling the terrorists freedom fighters. That's disturbing. How does that rhetoric fit their strategy?
It's, again, a well-used tactic. It deflects international criticism, gives them plausible deniability, sort of, lets them keep supporting groups without taking direct heat.
And rallies their own base.
Exactly. Reinforces their domestic narrative on Kashmir. But it's getting harder for them to maintain that internationally as more evidence comes out over time.
The rhetoric definitely ramped up, though. Accusations flying back India planning attacks in Pakistan, claims of water warfare over the Indus Waters Treaty.
Even though Pakistan hasn't always fully adhered to the treaty itself.
Right. And their National Security Committee met, predictably denied everything about Pahalgam. What's the point of these counterclaims, the Indus Waters Treaty stuff?
It's pure deflection, trying to shift the blame, change the subject internationally, paint India as the aggressor, play the victim card, maybe get international actors to pressure India to back down.
And the Indus Waters Treaty, suspending that, it does pack an economic punch for Pakistan, doesn't it?
Oh, significantly. They rely heavily on the Indus Basin for agriculture. So framing its suspension as an act of war is a way to raise the diplomatic stakes, maybe seek intervention.
Then there's the Pakistan Army Chief, General Munir. His past comments about a civilizational war, Kashmir as the jugular vein. There's this suggestion the attack was planned in Rawalpindi, where the real power lies.
Right, where GHQ is.
What should we read into his rhetoric and the timing here?
Well, Munir's aggressive language and the timing, it definitely raises concerns about the military establishment's intentions. A full-on war seems unlikely, given Pakistan's own problems.
Economic crisis, political instability, their own militant threats.
Exactly. But using proxies to destabilize things, that remains a very real possibility. His civilizational war talk suggests a deep hostility, a long-term view on Kashmir. And if it was planned in Rawalpindi, it just highlights the Army's ongoing grip on policy towards India.
So what's driving Munir? Is it distraction from those internal problems you mentioned? Rallying support? A full war feels too risky for them now?
It's highly likely a mix of those things. Stirring up trouble with India can be a way to unify a fractured public, take attention away from the economy or political chaos.
A classic diversion tactic.
Right. They probably know a real war would be catastrophic, but maybe they calculate that this kind of low-intensity conflict through proxies serves their purpose without risking total disaster.
And meanwhile, the ISI's propaganda machine is going full tilt on social media, pushing the false flag story.
Oh, yeah. Information warfare is key for them, shaping opinion at home and abroad, trying to muddy the waters and undermine any narrative that holds them responsible.
Okay, zooming out a bit. The broader geopolitical ripples. How does an attack like this hit India's image internationally? As a peaceful place, good for investment, tourism.
It inevitably takes a hit. An attack targeting tourists especially raises red flags for investors, scares off visitors. It impacts key economic sectors.
And the timing, could it be seen as trying to dent India's growing international influence?
That's possible. Some might interpret it as geopolitical signaling, an attempt to undermine India's rise.
Can the Indus Waters Treaty suspension, that's a big diplomatic and economic lever India pulled, what are we seeing internationally in terms of reaction? Is it likely to change Pakistan's behavior?
Well, suspending the treaty sends a strong message, no doubt. Big economic implications for Pakistan. Internationally, though, the reactions are often, predictable calls for maximum restraint.
On both sides.
Usually, yes. Often there's a reluctance from big powers to really single out Pakistan for sponsoring terror because of their own complicated interests in the region.
Geopolitics trumps direct condemnation sometimes.
It often seems that way. So the immediate impact of international statements on Pakistan's actual actions might be limited.
It's frustrating, isn't it? The victim often gets told to show restraint along with the aggressor. People are drawing comparisons to Ukraine, Gaza, suggesting some leaders, maybe in Pakistan, see escalation as useful, keeps them relevant, consolidates power.
It's a worrying thought that instability itself can become a tool for regimes under pressure or wanting to assert themselves.
And China. What's their role in this complex equation, given their ties to Pakistan?
China's role is tricky. They're a major ally of Pakistan, economically, strategically, but they also want regional stability for their own projects, like the Belt and Road.
A big war isn't good for business.
Exactly. A major India-Pakistan conflict would be bad for their interests. So they'll likely offer quiet support to Pakistan, but probably urge restraint behind the scenes to avoid things spiraling out of control.
Ultimately, it feels like the world needs to move past these generic calls for calm and actually address Pakistan's role in sponsoring terror.
That's the core issue many observers point to, yes.
Accountability.
Let's bring it back home. Internal dynamics in India after this. What are the risks? Divisions, blame games?
There's always a risk of that after a tragedy like this. Political point scoring, trying to find scapegoats. It's really important that national unity holds firm.
And crucially, avoiding blaming or alienating local Kashmiris.
Right.
That just plays into the terrorists' hands.
Absolutely. Their goal is to divide, to undermine that sense of shared Indian identity. Supporting the vast majority of Kashmiris who want peace and integration is vital.
So, looking long-term, tackling radicalization.
Yeah.
What's needed beyond just boots on the ground? Reforms. It needs a really sustained, multifaceted approach. Long-term reforms, police, judicial system administration, but also, crucially, economic development. Real opportunities for young people to counter the pull of money from extremist groups.
And tackling the ideology head-on.
Yes. Education, community work, promoting inclusive narratives to actively challenge and dismantle that extremist thinking. It's a generational task, really. It needs sustained effort on all fronts.
And finally, the inevitable question after any attack like this, intelligence failure. Is it actually realistic to expect every single attack can be stopped?
Look, good intelligence is absolutely critical. But stopping every single plot, that's virtually impossible. Terror groups adapt. They use low-tech methods sometimes that are hard to spot.
Finding the needle in the haystack.
Exactly. As some experts say, even with the best tech, predicting and preventing everything is an incredibly tough challenge. The focus has to be on constant improvement, better intelligence, faster response, and crucially, dismantling those underlying support networks.
Right. So, wrapping this up. This Pahalgam attack, it's brutal, carries this sinister message aimed at destroying peace in Kashmir, dividing India. The way it happened strongly suggests outside direction, likely Pakistan, but needing that local support network fueled by ideology, money.
A dangerous combination.
India's immediate response was tactically swift in parts, but now there are these huge calls for a much stronger reaction, raising fears of escalation with Pakistan.
Who predictably deny everything and push disinformation.
And the ripples go wide, potentially damaging India's image, testing the world's resolve on state-sponsored terror. Internally, India faces that challenge. Stay united, tackle the root causes of radicalization through long-term reform.
Yeah, it's not an isolated incident, sadly. It fits a larger, worrying pattern of cross-border terrorism. Huge consequences for the region, for India's cohesion, and a direct blow to Kashmir's hopes for peace and economic progress.
What's really concerning is just how cyclical this feels. Breaking this pattern is proving incredibly difficult.
It's a stark reminder of just how complex the situation is. and the long, hard road ahead for lasting peace and security in the region.
Which leaves us and you with a really critical question to think about. In a world where state-sponsored terror is still such a potent weapon, how can nations actually counter it effectively? How do you address the immediate threat and the deep ideological roots?
Especially when the state involved just denies and deflects.
Exactly. What role can and should the international community play in ensuring accountability, in preventing future atrocities when denial is the default response? A lot to chew on there. We encourage you to keep thinking about these complex issues we've explored today. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.